Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of Domain Experts, with those key individuals that have made a considerable mark in the fields that they're working in. Today as well, we've got an extraordinary gentleman with us. His name is Mr. Fahad Shameem, and he's the regional director for Gulf and PK at Ibex. You know, that's a household name in Pakistan. Was one of the first of the first. So very excited to speak to you. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Very kind of you to join us today.
Pleasure.
Right. So, Mr. Fahad, let's jump right into it. We would love to hear about your journey so far, like your professional journey. Where did it begin? How did you end up becoming, the regional director of such a big company?
So, my career started off about 22 years ago. But long story short, I am a bachelor's and a master's in computer science. So I think as far as my educational aspirations were concerned, I strived towards being a high-end software engineer or a developer, and then subsequently following that track. And I did follow that track right after my graduation. So I did about 5 years of technology development and consultancies of sorts with a variety of companies. But during that time, I sort of realized that my there were certain innate talents that I had possessed that I'd kind of suppressed over my journey that I can perhaps, that I could put to better use, right?
Right.
That balance of understanding technology versus business, plus that ability to be able to communicate across that divide, that large divide in some cases, right? So that eventually, helped me understand here my transition is probably best towards going to a kind of a sales and marketing role, technology consultative sales rather than independent mediocre sales. And that's where I transitioned. Of course, along the way, I met quite a few number of people whom I saw in terms of their capabilities across the sales and marketing landscape in the technology sector, and that helped me kind of visualize. So I kind of moved from a core techie focus to a more techno sales consultant role. And I've never looked back, honestly, right? These past 15, 17 years with the various companies I've worked with. And I guess, courtesy my, I would say, family background, they're all into business. So I had a ingrained entrepreneurial flair, right, buried somewhere. And that kind of comes out, I think, in
Absolutely.
And I have been, alhamdulillah, I've been succeeding across the board. Of course, these kind of initiatives have their ups, have their downs. But I guess people who persist in those areas, they, survive and succeed eventually. So that's my long and short. As far as Ibex is concerned, I think, I've been with the company 12 years, and that's the most I've stayed with any company. The last company I stuck around with was for 5 years. It's a big statement, right? Even for myself to consider, to evaluate, to benchmark it. But it's an interesting proposition, right? The company has such a large footprint and has such a diversity of solutions that I guess I haven't gotten bored with what these guys are planning to do or have been able to achieve, etc. I can go on and on, but let's keep it as an interactive session.
Yeah. So let's also talk about your role at Ibex. What exactly does it entail, being a regional director for both Gulf and PK?
So we are a large MNC, right? We are one of those unique MNCs.
Yeah, sure.
Very few examples come across to mind, right? That's is one of them. Systems, of course, is another. And back in the days when this company was formed, it was a very innovative concept. We were the first tech company to have been registered on the Pakistan Stock Exchange.
Right.
And for a good decade or so, people in the investment market, in the stock market, failed miserably to understand what a tech company, is able to do or can do. And the kind of trends that we see around tech startups or fintechs in terms of investment arrangements and then subsequently reinvesting those earnings back into a company, it was unheard of back in those days, right? And of course, we had to invest considerably. So lo and behold, right, a big company that comes across, I look after sales and marketing and strategy for them. And I predominantly joined them to expand not only their customer services and back office functions, but also to build up on their technology services functions, which back in those days was still a fledgling. We used to do a lot of stuff for internal companies, etc., but we didn't really had the wherewithal, or we weren't able to figure out how to exactly roll it across to external customers.
Right.
And that's something that I found very sort of passionate against my own particular career objectives, something that I understood, that I thrived in. As I already said, right, the barrier between business and tech is something that I kind of had a lot of confidence and success fulfilling. Lo and behold, so I look after in terms of territorial, these are dotted lines, right? So Gulf and Pakistan. Pakistan, of course, is a critical location, but left and right, sometimes in Asia Pacific, sometimes in the Gulf, predominantly, the region expands. So I look after strategy, sales, marketing, you name it, right? For partnership development across regions, etc.
Right. Makes sense. Now, since you've had decades worth of experience in this industry, how do you view the BPO industry in Pakistan? How has it evolved over the last decade or so?
Yeah, I think we've been in this industry for the past 20 years now, and honestly, I think in terms of Pakistan introduction to the idea, I think we are definitely the introducers of this concept in the market. We were perhaps the first company to be doing any BPOs for that matter, and a lot of small and mid-scale companies that you would now come across in the Pakistani sector are actually those individuals which have worked with us at some point in time, have had the exposure, have had the understanding, and then of course they perhaps developed that wherewithal to set up companies of their own. But we've been like a father figure across the BPO industry, number one. Number two, so as you may recall, right, BPO industry was all about telesales. I think initially up until the .com bubble, everybody was trying to sell and sell through teleservices, and then it slowly and steadily transitioned into customer services. Now, even from a customer services perspective, companies in Pakistan really didn't have a focus. I think back in 2005, 6, and 7, customer services were just a back side function that you people would have more so as a load rather than as a value, and it will be looked at as a cost center. So I think the BPO industry per se has transitioned in the sense that people have started focusing in that areas, and of course they tried building it up, but then subsequently, courtesy, costs, headaches, risk management and whatnot, they eventually decided to outsource it to a partner like us. And we kind of stood steadfast in terms of our service provisioning. Lo and behold, companies would come across and eventually would evaluate outsourcing, and they would find out that yes, that's the way forward. And secondly, from a BPO exact perspective, the industry is diversifying in two different ways. So customer services as a function in terms of manual intervention, where a person talks to you, I think that's decreasing. It has been on the decreasing end. And then an interesting element in that is, of course, communications via voice has transitioned towards offline communication. You would do a lot of WhatsApp communications, app chat communications. There were millennials coming across with all sorts of crazy channels to communicate their issues with. And I think as we move forward, a lot of that is going to be implemented in Pakistan as well. It is already there in some of the regional territories like Asia Pacific, pretty much. For example, one of the customers that's one of the largest, I would say, food chain management companies or food chain distribution companies, restaurant food distribution companies. They communicate with the customers offline. They don't have a voice-enabled channel at all. Prefer non-voice, right? So I think the overall industry is transitioning towards that. But at the same time, while customer services interaction, manual interaction is reducing, certain back office functions are emanating in terms of companies are beginning to understand that there is more cost-effective ways of doing business by outsourcing certain non-critical functions. For example, just like automotive sector doesn't ever manufacture tires, right? Have you ever come across a company which does that? No, it's a given. So similarly, companies are realizing that non-critical businesses, or non-critical functions are better off being offloaded to someone else who can do a much better job at it, do a much more optimized job at it. Right? So that's, I think, how the transition is. Of course, with the advent of technology, chatbots and AI bots, and that's some of the stuff that one of our sister companies also does, is to basically minimize that agent level interaction, that manual interaction, and that has a considerable impact. It reduces the need for the actual agent to be there. But and I see that progressing with the passage of time. I think, there's
absolutely. So very briefly, how do you think careers now are earlier? Because a lot of people looked at careers in this industry as a parking job. Let's be honest about it, rather than looking for a long-term career. I know, but I've seen a whole transition happen as well. And now more than ever, if you talk about millennials or even the Gen Z now, they have started taking a career in this industry a little more seriously. They say, with the advent of better long-term career growth and development, a lot of benefits on the job, off the job, flexi working hours. And I think COVID has really pushed that agenda. How do you think this new age of technology is going to evolve career prospects in this industry in particular?
Yeah, I think there are two different directions to it, right? So one, I think, as far as I think career profiles from these type of parking jobs are concerned, there is something that I feel very few people grab onto. If I am given as a layman, as a fresh graduate, an opportunity to work in, let's say, the telecom sector, right? That should, by the end of 1 year, enable me to understand a lot of intricacies involved in the telecom sector per se.
Absolutely.
That you can, maybe a 5-year experienced individual in the telecom sector working in one single department would end up collecting. So imagine the kind of subject matter expertise they're basically sitting on. I honestly, feel, I think that is an asset that people are building upon, working in these industries. And if, let's say, it happens in our areas, so a couple of years, if a guy spends in the telco sector and he improves, etc., he has this option to move across to other functions, and at the same time other industries within. So the other side might be ride hailing for that matter. And a year's experience in a specific industry, as I said, gives you tremendous amount of experience in that industry specifically. How you build up on it is something upon you entirely, right? And whatever drives you, the momentum, coming across, the impetus coming across, I don't see that happening, and I would love to see that happening a lot more. Number one. Number two, with the advent of technology, of course, right? These kind of jobs are minimizing. They are. How people adhere to that, I think is sort of classifying themselves above the mundaneness of the work. So simple customer services response or simple box pushing in terms of documentation, I don't think it's going to fly for a long time, right? So people coming out of their degrees, bachelor's or master's, or even without degrees, they have to have certain other skills or high-end skills in mind. Now, those high-end skills can be, anything. I don't know, depending on care. If you're from a technology background, basic stuff like designing a few screens might be, they're even possible with AI tools and certain other tools for that matter. But that aesthetics, that creativity, there's something that the mental sort of, you need a mental prowess for that. I think that's something we as a population should focus on. Can't dot the dots on it simply. But let's say if I were to compare, right, if I had been into standard, I would say jack of all trades, right? I'm not. I'm a master of a specific area, right?
Yeah.
So I would never want to be the jack of all trades, honestly speaking. So I think that uniqueness has to be developed individually with each individual, right? And how they move forward, knowing the fact that some of these mundane stuff, basic stuff, will be taken over by technology eventually.
For sure. And I think the only people who have reason to be afraid are the ones who refuse to upskill themselves in terms of, the technology that's available.
True.
Because a lot of times, even with the PPO industry, or even talking about careers related to, the field, we've seen that the technology is actually aiding a lot of things here. Talk about even the upper level management, data-driven decisions have become so much more effective. So we see more productivity, we see efficiency, we see better reporting. So I think the future looks hopeful. But let's talk a little bit about your own personal life. Tell us one fact about yourself that we would otherwise not be able to gauge from your LinkedIn profile.
Well, I've been thinking about it all this while, right? I mean, one of the things that I think I can probably claim successfully is I would say positivity. There are lots of different wordings for that. So there is unreasonable hope, and then there is reasonable. So I think I live by that mantra. Number one.
So do you think that is what inspires you to show up to work daily?
Yeah. No, that's another thing, right? What inspires me to work is or come to work is what I do, right? I mean, imagine if I were to match, I would say two different personalities, right? I mean, what we do essentially is match a certain company's requirements with what we can offer. And this presents an entire different stack of complexities that have to be handled at a very, very minute level. In some cases, can't be handled superficially. So what really drives me is that every day I come across a different scenario, right? A different kind of a problem to be solved. If it had been a regular stuff, like it becomes boring. That's one part of it. And the second part, of course, is the monetary benefit that it's all about. As I said,
absolutely. I was just going to say that because I've been working in a career in sales and marketing as well, and I can't deny the fact that one of the biggest motivators is obviously the monetary benefits that come out of it. So everything to do with capped and uncapped commissions. So for those of you who are looking at making a career in this field, so there's definitely the high of it, nothing like it. I will tell you that. Moving on. Now, you shared quite a few insights with us today. But if I were to ask you, what is the best piece of advice that you've received, something that has stayed with you throughout your professional journey, what would that be?
Yeah, so it sort of drives me to a factor which might be better phrased if I were to mention ki you may or you would be lucky enough to have a mentor in your life. But by that mentorship, I don't necessarily mean a person who would handhold you. Who would handhold you towards a certain transition. I think by that I mean basically is any person who looks on the other side of the mirror to what you see. Somebody out of the box, somebody looking at you out of the box, right? Or somebody looking at you from the outside, somebody understanding and figuring out a certain talent or trait that you have in you, but you don't see it for yourself. I think that one advice, particularly when I did my transition from a techie to a more aggressive, consultative roles, was something that was, sort of has been a critical piece of advice that I feel has made a game changer for myself. What else can I think of, right? I think that's one of the key ones. The other ones, of course, are passion. Of course, you need to have a lot of passion around what you do. Right? Positivity, I've already mentioned across. I think these are a bunch of stuff that have, one more important thing, compassion. Very, very, very important point.
Absolutely.
Very important point. I think that's something that a courtesy, a friend of mine, I came across a few books that helped me understand the power of compassion. I mean, you do it as a person, you normally do. You feel you don't really, you're not sort of disapproving the other person you're talking to. You're sort of respecting whatever they're giving across at you. But compassion helps you understand what may the other person be thinking, right, when they're talking. Whatever they're talking about, compassion helps you understand their emotions behind it, their feelings behind it. I think that's very critical, honestly. And a friend of mine actually recommended me a few books which helped me understand a lot about compassion. Whenever
Would you like
in
to
my
share those
conversation,
recommendations with us? Would you like to share one of those recommendations with us?
Sure. You know, I don't exactly remember the names of the books. I read them quite a long time ago. Stephen Covey, for that matter, a few books from Stephen. There is a book about compassion also, and there's a lot about other stuff as well. But just to give you from a guidance perspective, compassion is something that's lacking across the board as a population, as an entity, as a group of people. I wouldn't care less what you would think, right? I just realize the fact is the more you are able to understand the other person's scenario and perspective or vantage point, helps you communicate more effectively and get your work done. And mind you, it's all about communication. It's all about negotiations at the end of the day. So even you and I talking right now are,
absolutely. So
yeah.
Right. So as I see it, it's more like a transaction of knowledge. And thank you for your continued contributions to the knowledge economy. It's been an honor and a privilege, sir, but in the interest of time, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up with your comments about one very important question here. What do you think is the utility of forums like CxO Global?
Yeah, I think there should be a lot more such forums coming across. Maybe it's my lack of knowledge that I don't know, but yeah, I think one of the key things that this forum sort of helped me understand is that you don't have the time or the wherewithal to talk to a lot of people in the market, right? But you would like to focus to talking to some of the key persons in the market, right, and understand how the economy is moving across. So these kind of forums help really sort of in networking with individuals, which are the makers and the doers of the industry at large, right?
Absolutely.
And vice versa. You are also able to articulate what exactly is happening on the ground. I mean, you have such a lot of media focusing on all aspects of technology and having all sorts of conferences and etc. But that people connection is something that has been missing across in all of these, right? It's always a one-way information or a generic conversation per se, but specific conversation is something that such forums thrive on, and I think that's the right way forward, at least for folks like us, right, who want to focus on making differences, right, and making sure that those differences count or make a lot of difference in terms of improvements and whatnot.
Right. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Fahad Shameem. It's been an honor. I appreciate it, and we'll be seeing more of you in the future, hopefully.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Fingers crossed.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Please keep us updated with your comments and feedback. We'll see you next time with another interesting guest.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.